Redditus who bought a one-way ticket to start a new life. How's it going? What's your story? I grew up in NY and was living in the city. I thought I had a good life until a really traumatic experience came and knocked me on my ass mentally, emotionally, and financially. I began to fall apart and lost my job. Became completely agoraphobic and used drugs excessively to cope with the aftermath of the event. Double quote. Leaving some details out intentionally. I got a lump sum of money. And I didn't want my life anymore. I lived in fear. And had someone I loved by my side through the event who talked it over with me, and we decided to move to SF. We skimmed down both of our lives to a suitcase each. And booked our flights. I don't use drugs anymore. I work really damn hard to deal with my trauma. But I'm happy. My husband and I had moved around trying to establish roots after we got married. This was post 2008 recession. Ended up in a hellhole trailer. Dead end job, we were a month from being on the streets. Then my parents called and said apply for a couple jobs where they moved to a couple years prior. He did and we went for the interview. 3 days later the job he wanted hired him. Then we secured a rental over the phone. Which wasn't too hard. This was done within I think 2 weeks. Finally we packed our meager belongings, took our dog, gas in 2 cars, and a friend of my dad's brought his trailer down to load up the furniture we had. We drove 8 hours to our new state and home. It was a huge risk but it paid off. It'll be 6 years and 11 days when we left. We are celebrating putting down roots. Starting a new life, and we had our daughter almost 5 years ago. We are renting a better home still, but we have future hopes to buy it. He's still at the job. Has a part-time job also he loves. And we live a very average suburban life with the proverbial white picket fence. I never dreamed leaving for good would give us this amazing life. We had almost lost everything when we started over, and we can now say we made it. I went traveling for a year after uni. While in the US, I met a woman that I fell for pretty quickly. We did long distance for a couple years, where I went back to uni for a bachelor's degree. I managed to go back every year for a few months. And she was able to visit me as well once. Finally, after I graduated, I was able to buy a one-way ticket. I got rid of most of my stuff. Got 8 boxes of things shipped over. And said goodbye to all my family and friends. It was one of the scariest things I've ever done. And it was hard saying goodbye to my family at the airport in particular. That was one of the longest trips of my life, and not just because it was 21 hours in the air. But I'm glad I did. That woman is now my wife. We have a 1-year-old daughter. And we're now talking about me having our second baby. And I get to Skype with my family every day. My mum has not missed a single day since our daughter was born. I think I talk to my family more now than when I lived in Australia. Do I ever wonder what life would have been like if I didn't move halfway around the world? Yes. Every now and then. Do I regret it? Definitely not. Grew up in a very small town in West Virginia. Didn't have a great childhood. Struggled my way through college. Lost my only sibling to suicide and decided enough was enough. Packed a single suitcase and bought a flight to Alaska just about 3 years ago. I got an incredible, life-changing job when I moved here. Started a relationship that was amazing and made me feel so full of life and love. Made friends that have made me a stronger person and shown me what people outside of a small simple-minded town are like. Unfortunately, I am now in my first hard part of this move. Going through a breakup. But in less than a week I am moving into my first ever solo apartment. I have a new position at work that I'm loving. And I'm looking forward to the rest of my life. However it ends up going. So I guess I'm doing alright. Close bracket. I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast by myself 3 years ago. I'm happier in general. The weather is nicer. I make better money. I live by the beach. But I'm really lonely. I had a lot of friends back home that I'd known for years. It's hard to make new friends as an adult. I drink a lot more heavily too. The boredom of loneliness and the super easy accessible of hard alcohol at every store makes it too easy. I can't imagine leaving and going back to where I'm from though. Grew up in a smallish town in the Midwest and always dreamed of moving to New York City. Really can't pinpoint why exactly. Just seemed like from TV and movies that it was the best place to live. Wasn't confident to make the move right out of high school. So went to college near my hometown. Senior year of college. Around spring break time. Friends started getting job offers and planning to start their post-college adult life. Told myself, this is the best time. Make a move. Lease on my college apartment was up in August. So I picked the day with the cheapest one-way flight that whole month and bought the ticket. That was my moving date. Sold or donated everything I owned. I was 22. So nothing of real value: college clothing, IKEA furniture, etc. Stuffed one large suitcase and a backpack and boarded the plane. That was my first time I'd ever been to New York City. 13 years later and don't regret it for a minute. Best decision I've ever made. Small town New England. Everyone from my school was marrying each other and sending their kids to the same school. Or dying. I met a guy from California. Fell in love. And bought a one-way ticket. Packed my cat and hopped on a plane. Our relationship lasted 4 years. And our breakup was pretty amicable. After 7 years in California, I packed up the cat and drove to Oregon. California wasn't for me. And I'm so incredibly happy now. I have an amazing job and fiance. And the same cat, lol. Everyone thought I was crazy. And I was. But it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Not as long ago as some stories here. But my boyfriend and I left the UK 4 years ago and moved to Australia. Never looked back. It was tough for me trying to find a job and generally to make friends, but we've been fortunate. A couple that were on the same Whitsunday cruise as us while we were traveling gave me their number and said if we ended up living in the same area we should get in touch. We did and are now best friends. This month we get to apply for citizenship and are saving a deposit for a property. I have no regrets living here and never want to return to the UK. It's the best thing I could have done. Unfortunately, boyfriend feels the same. Though once we have those Aussie passports we will probably leave to go traveling for a few months here. Over 11 years ago I moved from Seattle to Barcelona. I lived there for 5 great years. And moved to Gothenburg, Sweden. I worked there for over 6 years. And met and married my wife, an Italian molecular biologist. 9 months ago we moved back to Spain, Pamplona. I have opened my own tattoo shop here. And she continues her research. It's been an amazing journey. Moved to London from Australia where I met my current partner and have had the healthiest, happiest relationship of my life. Discovered a passion that I'm about to go and study to turn into a new career after shifting away from a successful career I've built for the last 7 years. We moved over to my home city for a few years as one last big holiday before I go back to London to study and then settle permanently. I met the best bloke in the world and made better friends than I've ever had and realized who I am. I'm a big fan of the big life shift. I just moved to Australia a month ago. That sounds super dramatic, but I'm from New Zealand. So it's not really. The weather here is crazy hot. And I dragged my pets along for this one-way trip. I couldn't afford to take us all back home even if I wanted to. I got a new job and renting a cookie fucking house. But I had to leave. I was just trapped and miserable where I was. I applied for a job here on a whim and got offered it almost right away. It was hard to bite the bullet and buy that ticket and tie up the loose ends of my old life, but only a month in and I already mostly have my shit together. In fact, I had a really good day at work today and can honestly say today is the first day I've actually felt I can say I made the right decision. Life isn't perfect, but it's definitely better. Both my parents were born, raised, and still live in the same town. 1 street away from my nan. And from the house my dad grew up in. Nobody left. Southampton is bloody expensive. Full of chavs. And pretty conservative. I met a boy. fell in love, and moved to Glasgow. We spent a year there before we moved to Sheffield. We spent a year there before we moved back to Scotland. It's been 3 years since I left. I've faced financial hardships and mental health problems. And I couldn't be happier. For all the bullshit, at least I did something. And went somewhere. My parents told me that when I left they bet I'd be back within 3 months. I showed them. Graduated from high school without any plans for the future. I'm originally from a mid-Atlantic state and hadn't traveled much. Had a friend who was attending university in England. 5 days after graduation I bought a ticket for London. Got my first passport. And packed a bag. 2 months after, I applied and landed in a university in Liverpool. That was 20 years ago. 6 countries later, Germany, Cyprus, Virgin Islands, Mexico, Costa Rica, SoCal, Nice City, and DC. Now live in Copenhagen with my kids and husband. Starting a new career. There's been hiccups, breakups, shit jobs and dodgy situations, but follow your gut. Advice: buy the ticket and follow through. Learn to bartend. You can always get a job and it's a hell of a lot of fun. Don't stress, no one really knows what they're doing. There's a safety in having flexibility, not a loss. My first time does not count. My parents brought me from one shitty country to another tad better in hope for me to have some future. After the uni, I bought one-way tickets twice, moving counties. Happy to report, immigration is easier every time. And my current destination makes me feel like I belong for the first time in my life. All due to the right vibe and local mentality. I found my people and I am happier than ever. Now, I am considering having a second home somewhere far away to live my life in 2 completely different environments, substituting each other and never miss out on anything I enjoy in life. My girlfriend were tired of living in FL. I was working as a teacher and she is a designer and we both wanted to move west. We chose Seattle after visiting it once in April, and in June of that year then packed up and moved across country with 2 cats. No jobs and no living arrangements. I had an 11-month teaching salary, so I had some money coming in over the summer. We found work, an awesome apartment, and got married, and that big move was now 7 years ago. This past December, we bought a house after moving south to Portland. I consider our joint decision to pick up and manifest destiny our lives the real start of our life together in a lot of ways. Went to Oz on holiday from UK. Stayed in touch with a tour guide 17 years my senior when I came home. Soon realized we both want to take the same road trip through Western Australia. Bought a one-way ticket 3 years ago. Bought a camper van on arrival, traveled most of the country in 2 years. Fell for the bloke. Now carrying his baby and have no regrets leaving my old life behind. People back home thought I was brave or mad, or both, when I left. But I knew I'd regret not taking that chance way more than I'd regret taking it and things not working out. I moved from one country of America to Europe. And well, it has been tough. 7 months ago or so I thought it would be great if I just start to live in another country. I'm still 16 and that meant I would need to leave my family, especially my mom, and friends. As an underage it's pretty annoying the amount of documents you have to fill up. But anyway, the hardest part were friends. I already knew the language but I needed some fluently, which I didn't have then. And classmates also didn't help much. So in a moment I was dealing with the lack of friends, language, a harder level of studies, nostalgia factor. Briefly, I almost went to pieces. So I decided to leave my class and go to another scientific branch to social studies. And yeah, completely different. I made friends in a few days. But the problem is that now I can't study what I wanted to do in future due to my recent change. That's how it works here. So once I finish high school I'm going to return to the country of the beginning. At least with another language. I moved from a small town in Ontario, about an hour away from Toronto, to the Rocky Mountains when I was 18, and it was the best decision I ever made. I had graduated high school a few months earlier and come that fall all my friends went to university. But I didn't. I knew I wasn't ready for that. I slowly realized how small and uneventful my hometown was. By Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving so early mid-October, I was convinced by some family members to give West a go. The legal drinking age out there was 18, which was a perk, 19 and on. I quit the job that I had had since I was 15 and bought a one-train ticket to Alberta. Train because why not? I'm on adventure. My parents drove me to the station. My mom cried. I cried. And I boarded a train for 3 nights to my new home. I had applied to a few jobs but hadn't heard back from them yet. Luckily I got an email while I was on the train saying I got a waitressing job with accommodation. I arrived in the small mountain town in Alberta. I grew up a lot in that first year out there. Earned a living on my own. Became a ski bum. Fell in love. Had my heart broken. Broke a few hearts. Made some of the best friends I've ever had from around the world. Climbed mountains. Swam in glacier-fed lakes. Got too drunk. And experienced a way of life that has become the basis of my being ever since. A life of adventure. Love. Kindness. And passion. Still don't know what possessed me. But I decided that the best way to overcome my separation anxiety was to pack up my sheet and move 13 hours away for college. I'm still in my first year. And it's been hell. But I'm really glad I did it. At first all I could think of was going back home to Los Angeles. But now I'm actually starting to think about moving somewhere else after college. Maybe San Francisco or Oregon. The place I grew up was practically paradise. Perfect weather. Suburban but close enough to LA to have lots to do. But it just never really clicked with me. With my separation anxiety. I really thought that I was gonna be stuck there forever. But now I'm at a point in my life where I'm starting to feel like I can choose to do whatever the hell I want with it, and that's an amazing feeling. If anyone's reading this and thinking about making a big move, here's my advice. Be lenient with yourself. I was really miserable the first few months after I moved because I thought I had to tough it out. Caving and registering my cat as an ISA and bringing him up to live with me was one of the best things I've ever done for my mental health. He gives me a little taste of home without me having to snap and drive 13 hours back to LA. After breaking up with GF in 2015, I sold my car and bought a ticket from Brazil to Italy. I always had a dream to study graphic design in Netherlands. So I lived for a while in Italy, and after traveling for 1 year in Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal and Eastern Europe, I did the big move to Netherlands and I was accepted in the university I wanted. Also, during my last week in Porto, I met my actual GF, and after she finished her master's she also moved into NL. Now I am doing the 3rd year. With a super nice GF and working part-time. I just miss my family and to smoke pot with my friends. Beside this, I have been in love with Den Haag and I don't depend on cars to make any move. Life is super chill in NL. Although, sometimes I do feel I am living in a bubble. This is too good to be true. Now I am trying to learn Dutch and it's been the hardest thing I tried so far, so after the coding class in school. So, if there is anyone here that enjoy having a good talk or just to share a joint, hit me up. Moved from the UK to Australia at 20. I was depressed and stuck in a rut and just out of an abusive relationship. I needed a fresh start. 4 years later and I'm in a wonderful relationship with the man of my dreams. My mental health and financial stability are the best they've ever been, and I've just received great news about future career progression. In the past 4 years I've also gained multiple qualifications and my driving license. My immediate family have all been out here to visit me. But I've lost touch with all but 2 super close friends. I was going through a rough patch when I left and I distanced myself. They were incredible to me and I know I hurt them. But I feel like trying to speak to them now would cause more hurt than good. I have been lucky enough to find some incredible friends out here. It definitely feels like home now and I become a permanent resident this year. After I graduated high school, I realized that going to college or staying in the small Midwestern town I was in would just lead to a dead end for me. Or a very average life at best, which I didn't want. Everybody thought I was crazy. But I gathered all my money from my part-time jobs I worked during school. Borrowed a little bit money here and there. And literally just bought a plane ticket to another country in Asia. I had like $400 when I arrived. And that was it. Now I have a pretty good career related to what I enjoy and make good money for my age. I got really lucky somewhere in the middle. And don't get me wrong, at first it was filled with nothing but hardships, no money, no friends, no family nearby, legal visa problems, etc. But I just plowed right through all the bullshit and at the end got what I wanted. And I'm still working on being better at my job and being more successful hardworking. Since I live in one of the biggest cities in the world, I've met a lot of interesting people. Even celebrities. Have had some crazy experiences. And some fun ass partying for sure. I know that I couldn't have experienced any of this had I just stayed back home. So far so good. Grew up in New Hampshire and skiing was always my biggest passion. I always marveled at the mountains you'd see in ski movies and the amount of snow they would always get. I had a friend who moved to Utah and just looking at his Snapchats and hearing the way he would talk about it would make my heart race. My senior year of college I decided I would move out once I graduated. I sold almost everything I had besides some clothes and other essentials. I moved out to Utah 3 days after graduating and have only been back a couple times in the past 3 years to see family. I don't regret a single minute of it. I live a healthy lifestyle and there's just so much to do out here. People always ask me when I'm coming back, and to be honest there's no reason for me to go back. Everything I could ever want is right here. Also, if I ever leave for a couple weeks, whenever I come back I catch myself smiling like an idiot just looking at the mountains in the distance. Grew up in the Midwest. Started snowboarding and fell in love with it. Took a couple small trips out west while working at small ski hills in the Midwest winters. One year, there was a time where my lease for my apartment was up right about the time I was switching between my summer job, golf course, and winter job, ski hill. The famous quote from Warren Miller had echoed in my head for years. If you don't move out west this year, you'll be 1 year older when you do. That was my chance. I bought a SUV. Packed everything I owned into that in a U-Haul trailer. And drove west. I had never stepped foot in Utah until I drove across the border. I ended up in Salt Lake City. Drove to a library and found a room to rent on Craigslist. It's now been 5 years and I love it here. I'm working a very strong job in my dream job. A part-time job getting paid to ski. Found the girl I'm going to marry. And literally love life right now.